another episode of Tiny Nest. I'm Kiva.
And I'm Jake. This series is following our tiny house project from the early stages through to completion and beyond.
In this episode, we show how we fill our walls with Roxul insulation. We've already completed a few tasks that required insulation, and we used Roxul for those as well. Many people seem to go for spray foam, but there were a few reasons that we did not. For a professional to install it would be very expensive, and to DIY it could get very messy. It also makes fishing anything through the walls later almost impossible. Roxul was less than half the price of even the DIY spray foam, plus it's much more forgiving and easy to work with. The one relevant advantage of spray foam is that some types produce a built-in vapor barrier, whereas we will have to install one separately. The number one thing that we picked up from researching insulation was that careful and thorough installation is far more important than what you use or what R value it has. You're worse off with air gaps or poorly mixed spray foam that's supposed to be R20 than you are with meticulously installed Roxul at R14. You're watching a time-lapse of the entire process. We're going to cut it short to show some more detailed examples of our technique, but we'll add the entire time-lapse to this playlist. One of our favorite videos is actually our exterior siding time-lapse, which is not part of the main building series, so definitely go check it out.
So here's an example of a spot where we've had to get insulation around something, and then also we're going to have to deal with a wire going across the space. So you can see this piece of backing here, how we've tucked a piece of insulation in behind, and then just put a tiny little cube in here to fill that. So now we've got pretty much like a cubic space with no corners to try to tuck into anymore. We've already done that by doing this. But we've got this wire, and I've got a piece that's the right width to go across, but we're gonna need to cut a slit in here so that it can tuck around the wire. So I cut it pretty deep so that I can sort of tuck it in and then lift the front and watch that the back piece is going in behind the wire, and then if I need to I can sort of shimmy it under. And then I want to make sure it gets down into the corners. And then when I put that in front, I know that the wire isn't impeding the insulation's puffiness from filling all the way to the back and, you know, all the corners and everything. Okay, here's kind of a double challenge where we've got a space in behind some blocking, but there's also one of our rods there. So I'm going to take a thin piece, and this is sort of full depth. It's a little bit compressed, but this would be the full depth of the space. So I'm going to cut a bit of it off so that I can tuck it in to like this depth, and if I'm lucky I can tuck it in behind and kind of turn it in behind the rod here, and then do my best to keep it fluffy. That's all right. Okay, I'm gonna get a little bit more in there to bring it up flush with this surface, and then again I'll end up with just a 3D, or sorry, like a cubic type of space to finish off. So I'm just gonna hold this up and get a rough idea of where that is, and then another thin slice and trimmed down just a bit. That's pretty good. And then I'll use this, which I think is the right width. And then I've got this wire to deal with. I'm just getting this a little bit out of the way, and then I've got a sliced piece that I can tuck in around like this. Close that in, and then this end meets up with the fill that I did over there, and then it's pretty close, and I'll just have to notch the next piece just a tiny bit. I was just using this because it was just sitting around. Some of the spaces are narrower than the standard 16 on center size that the bats are made to fill, because, for example, here we've got a window, so we've got the jack stud pretty sure that's what it's called, beside the stud that would make it 16 on center to here. So anyway, what we've got is a space that's about 13 inches wide, and to get it to snug in, I'm going to make it at least 13 and a quarter-ish. So I'm going to take a full bat here, and then I got to slice this all the way down. The plumbing is the trickiest stuff to fill in around, obviously, because it's circular, so that just adds another layer of finicking. I found that it's best to work in sort of vertical, like stacked pieces. Elsewhere, dealing with plumbing, I tried kind of filling in the back and then having a piece that kind of like fit in front and enveloped the pipes. But then I had this thin floppy thing on the front that would want to fall out. So I'm going to try something different with a more stacked approach here. And because we got this wire here, I'm going to start with a little thin one and then kind of work up and see if I can't get it nice and snug. I think I might actually do this piece first and then tuck this one back in after. See if I can't tuck this kind of up and under. It's a wee bit finicky. Oh yeah. It's almost like we're getting somewhere. So for this one, I cut up to, like I made this distance up to the halfway mark of the pipe so that I could cut out a trench out of this piece to make it fitted. But the next one, I'll go just to the bottom here so that I'm just dealing with this rather than trying to make some piece that's going to go in and then it'll be impossible to wedge in there. So that's what I'll do for this part. And since I've got the angle already cut from cutting this one on this piece, I just need to kind of eyeball or, you know, look roughly at how much that is and I can cut it. I can see that it didn't quite expand all the way to the corners here, so I'm just going to poke at it a bit. So then the last piece will fit over this whole pipe, but because the pipe curves in at the bottom here, I'll tuck a tiny bit in to kind of make it more of a like a dome than like a pipe, if that makes sense. You'll see what I'm doing. Okay, so just trying to fill in underneath so that there will be no air gap, basically. That's all I'm doing there. So now I'll just cut an arbitrarily large piece, and then I just have to cut a trench that's big enough for the entire pipe, not just half of it. So probably be like that. And I just want to make sure as best I can that this is actually tucking in and filling that spot and not getting caught anywhere. That looks pretty good. So we're being super meticulous especially with the plumbing, to make sure that everything is fully encompassed and that there's no air pockets anywhere. And we're just taking as much time as we need to do it so that it's as good as it can possibly be. And we're even going as far as, for example, like the wraparound insulation on the 90s didn't quite make it all the way. So when we go to cover that, we're even going to fill in that little opening, which is kind of exposed pipe, with a bit of insulation so that there's, again, no air pocket for heat transfer. Alright, to finish off this cavity, I'll cut a piece that goes to about there and slit the top so that I can get it up under there. And then to finish it, I'll basically fill in up to the right edge of the box here all the way through. And then I'm just left with a square here to fill in. I found it's kind of easier to do the funky stuff and build up towards something simple, as opposed to, say, doing like a slice like this to fit underneath and then having to tuck something in behind and then another layer and then another thing here or whatever. Just fill in this with little bits and use up some scraps, and then have one square piece to deal with. There we go, that's a pretty good job of filling in every little crevice that we could and getting the best insulation.
So Jake has made this backing, which we're going to screw all of our electronics to, and we're going to use it to make sure that the wires will come out of their designated holes while we're insulating this last cavity. Otherwise, it may be a struggle later on when we're trying to line things up.
Okay, so we just marked out the heights of the holes there, and then we'll just kind of measure over to see how far we want the bundle to come out, and then we'll rig up some kind of thing to kind of string it up and hold it in that place so that we can fill the rest with insulation, and it'll be poking out, you know, in the right spot when we're done. Let's see, we're over top of these holes here.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty good. Great success! Alright, we managed to get the wires held in place to match up with the holes of our little board that's going over here, and figured that if I used these tie wraps with the screw holes in them and just shimmed out enough to line them up the hole, that would work perfectly. And so they're actually kind of held ready to poke out of the wall exactly where they need to be. And I'm just gonna string all the weight up out of the way, which I'll show you in a sec, so that I'm not fighting this as I'm working in here.
Now that we made sure that everything fits in the backing, Jake has strung all the wires up, and I'm going to take this now and sand it and paint it.
And I'm going to fill in this last cavity with insulation.
If you want to see some of our previous videos, click on the preview tiles, and subscribe if you want to follow our progress. You can also visit our website here.
There's a fly in here. It's like, boom. I shan't play with you again until you've had a wash.